Now, for more on the trade talks and the tariffs, I'm joined by Isaac Cohen. He's the president and CEO of Inverway. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Ms.
So, a long time in the making. Talk about the progress that was made during these discussions. What's your reaction to the talks and some of the concessions made?
Well, I think the fact that there are talks is progress, in the sense that it's better to talk and to try to sit down and negotiate instead of, well, imposing unilateral measures on one side or the other. So this is a very important step, I think. And the fact that the president received the Chinese delegation is also very important because he's centralizing the decision-making process. The administration is divided. You have factions within the administration. And the president is going to have to arbiter. He's going to have to become the referee of this pressure that is from one side and the other. And I think it was key, the fact that he received the delegation.
Certainly important to have a clear voice on this. So in terms of where the two sides are on this, how far apart are they in terms of the sticking points?
Well, usually this conversation starts by the easy part. The low-hanging fruit, as they say, starts first. And then the tough issues are left for the end, for the decision makers, the ones that hold the power to decide. They are the ones who are going to have to deal with the toughest issues. But the easiest part, I think it's going along and it's working well.
Now, we know there were issues with forced technology transfer that the U.S. brought up, also more access to the Chinese market. And we know that China is also working on policies to continue opening up more sectors. What sort of progress do you think we saw there?
Well, China is in the process of turning around its economy towards a more domestic-oriented market. And I think that's very important because China has potentially probably the biggest market in the world, but it's potential. We need to see that market really consume, and then that will change the whole trade situation in the world.
Now, we know that President Trump did say they were making progress. Liu He, the vice premier of China, also with a sense of progress there. But do you think a deal is possible by this March 1st deadline?
Oh, I think so. Yes, it is possible. The fact that these tariffs are in place, they can be dismantled very quickly. And they can come to an agreement in the short time that they have, yes.
Now, Trump did say that he was prepared to move ahead with these higher tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods if Beijing didn't acquiesce to the U.S. demands. How do you see that if they do intend on raising those tariffs? How do you see that affecting the talks?
Well, it's a negotiating posture. You know, you sort of put like a deadline and then you start pushing against that deadline. I'm hopeful that that's going to be only a negotiating strategy.
Now, as China continues to open up sectors and it did put these policies in place, what assurances is the U.S. still looking for?
Well, I think that the issue of intellectual property has to be on the table. The fact that some companies have been asked to share the technology, those issues that are not necessarily trade-related, but that are key in order to open the Chinese economy to foreign investment. Those issues are tough. They're not easy. I think the tariffs can be dealt with relatively easily, but the intellectual property part and the part on technology transfer are probably the key elements of the negotiation.
So being that we've now gotten to this point, how do you think that this changes the narrative in terms of how the U.S. and China view each other as they continue to invest in things like high technology?
Well, I think they are competitors. They are competing in a world that is moving very fast, and in a way that's healthy for the world economy. You know, competition is good, it's healthy, as long as it is done according to rules. So we need to hope that these negotiations are going to end up strengthening the rules-based trading system. And if we can accomplish that, I think this crisis will be seen as progress.
And we know that China has gone to the World Trade Organization about its treatment of the U.S. tariffs. Do you see more assurances coming from the U.S. side on that, or is the U.S. going to circumvent the WTO?
Well, the U.S. has gone to the WTO as well. So both of them have sort of asked the WTO to do something from their perspective. So I think there's a meeting ground there. And I am hopeful that we're going to strengthen the rules-based system, which is the WTO after all.
And obviously, this is happening at the same time. There's a lot more scrutiny on Huawei and Huawei CFO Wang Mengzhou. We also saw ZTE also being under the spotlight earlier. Some of this is being viewed by people as the U.S. attempt to really stifle China's growth in some of these high-tech sectors. What sort of assurances does China want from all this?
Well, sometimes, these things have to be viewed separately because the situation with Huawei is one thing that has to be dealt with in a way that should be separate from the talks. I think that if they are kept separate, that will be fine. And I hope there is a resolution on the other issue in order to strengthen the possibility of success in the trade talks.
Now, we know that we got to this point because President Trump and President Xi met in Argentina and agreed to these talks. And President Trump has indicated that essentially a face-to-face with President Xi is what's going to finalize a deal in this case. What should we be watching for in the coming weeks?
Well, I think President Trump is saying that he knows who has the last word. And the difficult issues will have to be dealt by themselves. Once the heads of state deal with these issues, then we can see clearly where they're heading. Because at the technical level, you can go so far. At some point, you have to go up to the final decision-making level.
All right, we shall see. Thank you so much.